Hey innies and outies, I'm FoxLogic and I have decided to make a quick video. Actually, wait, this video didn't turn out to be quick at all. Oh god. In my last video I said I wouldn't have time to get out as much as I want. So I found a topic that wouldn't require any extra artwork. I do have 2 videos I'm currently working on that I am up to my shoulders in new animation frames with and FoxLogic poses, but those will come out as soon as I'm finished. But this topic, I found a great thing to share that didn't require a ton of extra drawing. Instead, it sent me on a journey through all of my sketchbooks, peachy folders, and dusty paper stacks to find everything I've already drawn. I want to talk about the origin stories of FoxLogic and my other characters, and why I've chosen this skull-faced, dark-furred, shape-shifting fox Sona. I'm also going to be talking a lot about the history, or my history, as an artist. To get to the bottom of this, I will start at around 1995 to 1996. I was in elementary school at the time, and my parents had given me a sketchbook. My mother told me that my cousin had started drawing, and that she had already proven to be mega talented. My aunt had even started to make cards from her artwork. I honestly don't even know enough about this part or how it went down, but from my perspective, my cousin was already putting her artwork on folded cards, and my aunt was either selling them or handing them out. Anyway, my whole family was just super impressed with my cousin, and my mother had the idea to get me my own sketchbook. I was already doodling like a caffeinated maniac at the time, and this just was meant to be an outlet for my creativity and to hone in on a talent that my mother saw in me. So I did what any young cousin or sibling would do of an older cousin or sibling once I got the art book. I completely mimicked my cousin, like to an annoying level. I even picked fights with her, which was pretty embarrassing. Being a stuck-up, self-absorbed little crotch goblin motivated me somehow, and I took to drawing literally everything. She made an original species, I made an original species that was a little bit similar. Basically, take all of the drama in the furry community, or just all roleplay communities in general, and condense it into 2 preteens, and there you have it. I am so glad social media didn't exist back then. It's pretty funny to me that most of my characters at the time looked like J.R. Renalds' anthropomorphized Camel off of the cigarette advertisements. I don't think cigarette advertisements were an actual inspiration to me, but this was before the internet as we know it today, and I had to find references from somewhere, I guess. And they did have an anthro character that was fairly well drawn, so who knows? A year passed, and it didn't take long for my younger cousin to jump into the fray from seemingly out of nowhere and battle my cousin and I with her own artwork and characters. From there, it was always the 3 of us, 3 artists who were constantly bouncing ideas off of each other. Eventually, I would get over myself long enough to make an entire world that interacted with their worlds. We 3 witches were world building back in middle school. All of this was before sites like DeviantArt and Fur Affinity, even before SheezyArt or VCL or YERF. Yeah, that's how old I am. If I wanted to show my cousin a new character I made, I had to take it out of my sketchbook, place it in a protective plastic sleeve, place that along with all other sorts of world building ideas that I had in a yellow envelope, and ship it to them. So I convinced my mother to take my artwork into work with her to photocopy it from her job's copier, but I got her in trouble. But I digress. Now, at the time, I didn't really have an idea of what a Sona was. And to be fair, I don't think many of us did. But man, did I love making original characters. I designed so many characters. Like, holy crap, I think I made a character and then shelved them. I filled up entire sketchbooks with just characters. Some of these characters wouldn't even return in most cases. I also found inspiration from movies and video games that were popular at the time, and holy bejesus did I love foxes. I'm pretty sure that my unbridled obsession from foxes came from Milo and Otis.
Ha! You call that a tail? This is a tail! Ha ha ha! And with that, the fox jumped away, laughing.
As a kid, I watched this movie so much that I remember the first VHS tape becoming damaged from constantly rewinding it. And yes, I'm aware of the animal abuse in the filming of this. It breaks my heart and crushes my happy childhood memories, though to be fair, I was a bit of a weird kid, so I'm not really all that worried about the little punk that was my past self. Now, though I didn't really have an exact Sona at the time, I did communicate my feelings and experiences through character drawings, which is kind of funny to me. In many occasions, I was given a journal to write in, but never stuck to it. Instead, I would just illustrate my feelings. My first Sona, if you could call it that, was a lion thing. I eventually gave this lioness a dragon tail with a fox tail tuft, and this was just me. It wasn't really named at the time, but I used it in every instance in my sketchbooks where I wanted to detail out a feeling that I was having. This character was more so meta-existing than interacting with anything in my personalized universe of characters. Going back through my old sketchbooks and seeing this character really dawns on me how I was experiencing some pretty hard things at the time and how real it felt when I drew them out. I even touched on topics that still affect me to this day, and it's fun because only I understand what these pictures are even meant to portray. This is much better than anybody finding a journal and reading my deepest thoughts and feelings. Good luck figuring this out. As I got older, this nameless dragon lion fox morphed into a more anthro form and became a character that eventually did exist in my universe. This character was known as Wit Fox. Yeah, dumbest name ever. But there you have it, an actual full-blown Sona for the first time. This character was the main goddess in my world who had narrative-breaking abilities and could warp all of reality with my characters. Basically just a huge Mary Sue. Though I did use her to explain major character changes with some of my storylines. I even got into a fight with my cousin about having a species that was too similar to her species, so I used the goddess character to swoop in and make some major changes to make the characters more unique. And I'm glad I did. This species later became known as the Pearl Bloods and became my first ever major original species. There was a lot of story that I had created around these critters, and the whole morphing of their shape became a huge exodus story for them leaving the capital city of the main planet of my universe, which made them more mysterious. Then high school hit. First day. It is the start of the new century, and internet is a readily available, rapidly growing environment. VCL and YERF were the first sites that I ever posted my artwork to, and I had stumbled across another furry artist who I immediately latched onto. Kim Arndt. Kim Arndt, also known as Sinks. I know I'm saying her name incorrectly. Her anthro work was so beautiful to me. Admittedly, I printed off her entire gallery and kept sleeves of her work in the back of my art book for references. Thankfully, I wasn't silly enough to trace any of her work, but it was very clear I drew a lot of inspiration from her. I worshipped her. I later in college messaged her on DeviantArt to tell her how big of an inspiration she was to me. She thanked me in a short reply and told me that she was happy to see that my work wasn't a direct copy of hers and that I had my own style. That wasn't exactly the kind of message that I had hoped to get back, but it was kind and it was simple. She later became a storyboard artist for Codename Kids Next Door and is now directing Big Mouth. I knew I liked that show. Anyway, back to the timeline. A few years into high school and I came across another huge inspiration. Jhonen Vasquez's Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Before Invader Zim, there was a wonderfully deranged series of comics about a kid who murders people in the most gory fashion imaginable and just spits in the face of, well, everything. And I loved it. Hot Topic was only in one mall and it was too far from home to go. So instead, I bothered my mom to take me to the local comic book store and I bought up the collection of JTHM, and boy did my art change. I went from drawing 90s style Blade Runner inspired furry drama to straight up occultist nightmare fuel, and I used a lot of ink. So much ink. My art got dark, both literally and figuratively, but I was an angsty teen at the time, so it kind of just worked. I also fell in love with discovering comics. The feel of their pages, the idea that I could just read them over and over again, even their smell was an inspiration. So to satiate my sudden dragon lust for comics, I broke into my dad's closet and found his entire collection of heavy metal that ranged from the 70s to the 80s. I was also looking for porn, and in my eyes, I had found a gold mine. Pre-fur affinity, not safe for work loot art. One comic that I had become obsessed with almost immediately was Bernie Wrightston's Freak Show. It was a dark yarn about a traveling circus attraction that collected mutants from all over the world to host a macabre display. There was love, there was passion, there was murder. It was basically a super effed up version of X-Men that pulled all the stops when it came to horror, and I loved it. At this time in my art, I was starting to develop some more mature themes in my storytelling, mostly murder and death with the occasional lewd piece thrown in. For the most part, I mimicked a lot of American-style horror-themed comics, though obviously still all furry. Fox was still my Sona, and I had made changes to her to look more fox-like, but I really wasn't drawing her all that much. At this time, DeviantArt had just launched, and having a Sona was a widely accepted thing in the furry community, though we'd never share our involvement with the fandom with anyone outside of art sites. If my friends saw me drawing Fox and inquired about the character, I'd just tell them I was drawing whatever. Haha! I'm just drawing! Nothing to see here! It's weird because being a furry is just part of being a fandom, like any other fandom, but it's the only fandom that I know about that has what feels like a coming out process. Mom, Dad, I'm a furry. Though upon looking at more of my art up to that point, I'm sure my friends just accepted that I drew everybody as a furry, so that was just part of my normal behavior. Nobody was safe. I was also super enamored by digital art. I had seen so much artwork on DeviantArt and was just so determined to learn how to draw in digital art programs. My family owned an old Dell that was riddled with viruses thanks to my constant stream of downloading music off of LimeWire, so I did all of my digital art at school with computers that already had Photoshop installed. I didn't have a tablet at the time, so I got really good at using the pin and path selection tool. I would sit for hours in the library working on my artwork instead of socializing. It was actually something that all of my teachers noticed, and when I graduated, they band together to make a special grant for me to go out and buy my own tablet. I'll never forget that moment I walked off the stage with a completely perplexed face as to why I had suddenly gotten this grant for $300, which I didn't even know existed, to run into the librarian of my school, who then leaned in with a big grin on her face and said, "Use it to buy a tablet," which I did. My first tablet was a Wacom Intuos 2. Rest in peace, old friend. College was a whole shock to the system. I had decided to leave my state to go live in Chicago, Illinois. I attended Columbia College, Chicago. Yep, that's the same school that Genndy Tartakovsky attended, and I studied film and video and animation. My sketchbooks went from being filled to the brim with furry art to character art from games like Dofus and Wakfu, with schoolwork, color theory, storyboarding, anatomy. I was also drawing digitally, so my artwork was mostly on my computer or uploaded to DeviantArt. At this time, it was really hard to tell where exactly I was getting my inspiration, so it's safe to assume that I was mostly inspired by other artists on DeviantArt. One in particular comes to mind, Jennadelle. I adore her artwork, though she has a fan base that wasn't far off from the Rick and Morty fan base.
So, wait, I have to pause here. I'm so sorry. I originally had something that was already scripted and recorded out, but upon looking at some of my old artwork from this time period, specifically my digital artwork, I really copied Jennadelle, and I should have been scrutinized for it a lot more than I did. I kind of feel like I got away with artistic murder. Now, I wouldn't exactly say that this is plagiarism just because I didn't trace her work, and I wasn't trying to sell my work at the time. These were just projects that were just fun, and I was 18, 19 at the time. So I made some really stupid decisions, and I honestly feel bad. But I've learned. I don't do this sort of thing nowadays. I'm 33 now. It has been a while. I've learned my lesson. I copied her. Just straight up. And it's it's heart-wrenching to me to see this. It's funny, when I recorded, I didn't even realize that I had copied her so much, and now upon looking at it, I owe her an apology. I really do. So I really hope that she accepts my apology. She doesn't have to, but I clearly was very inspired, and Jennadelle, I'm sorry. Like, I'm very sorry. So I hope you can look past that. I hope everybody can look past that. I've definitely learned over the years not to do this. Yeah, I gotta come clean. This was a shitty thing for me to do. Anyway,
In college, I got the opportunity to hang out with other artists in person, which was great. For once, I was surrounded by a whole ton of like-minded people, and I became very open about being a furry, as there were a whole ton of other furries that I attended classes with. I tried all kinds of mediums, and my digital art skills just flourished. Eventually, I would draw mostly on the computer, and very infrequently drew in sketchbooks. Now comes the part where FoxLogic's design inspiration comes in. In 2007, I was hanging out with a couple of friends who decided to visit the Chicago Science and Industry Museum. Fox had already received a complete redesign, and I was planning to draw her more. I was kind of going back to my Kim Arndt-inspired style and had some plans to finally make the comic that I had been dreaming about for, at this point, years. But that would be the last time I would ever draw Fox as a character, or as a creation, or as a placeholder for my self-insertion into my world. Just completely stopped. We were visiting an exhibit known as People of the Bog. It initially sounded super boring to go look at a ton of petrified prehistoric human remains, but my friends said that it would be a blast, so I went along. When I got there, it was nice to see that the place wasn't as packed as it was for Body Worlds, and we got to look at all of the recovered artifacts from these primitive people that lived in an unforgiving lush wetlands. I pretty much acted blasé until I saw it. Behind a casing of glass, and otherwise overlooked by those who were interested in the human remains, was a black furred dog laying upon a display with its face completely clean down to the bone. Its fur was still in spectacular condition, as though resting at the bottom of the lake only helped make its fur look lush and full. I think I stood there for 5 solid minutes until my friends realized I wasn't following them any longer, and they had to come and get me. But I stood there for as long as I could to completely memorize that dog. I burned its image into the back of my mind. Sadly, when I searched for that dog on the internet, I could not find its image, so these will have to do. But my artwork exploded. For years after that, I drew this skull-faced dog and other skull-faced critters in my sketchbooks and on my computer. Graduating college was hard, both in making sure I graduated on time and my whole life afterward. I graduated in '08 and was met with a market crash at the very same instance in which I was trying to build up my life. I did get an internship with Flying Rhino, which was neat, but my mom was promptly diagnosed with breast cancer and my focus was just not there, so I quit. I was also seeing how my cousin was struggling, and seeing her experiences, I had become terrified of what I suddenly felt were volatile work environments for artists and animators. I saw what she was going through, and I was suddenly completely disenchanted by pursuing the career. This was also before the Me Too movement, and I had a few run-ins that kind of put a sour taste in my mouth. So I let myself down by completely stopping. It was really hard to find work, and I didn't want to stoop to desperate levels, so I worked in the food service industry, which is funny. I became a sushi chef before I ever became an established professional artist. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I barely ever drew. Compared to what I had been doing in the past, I did get the occasional commission and drew for fun when I fancied, but mostly just did commissions and original character art from World of Warcraft. My talents atrophied, and my own unique world had dulled and faded, though I still remember quite a bit of what my younger self would have wanted to do with the old stories with my OCs. I graduated in '08, and it was 2018 when I finally forced myself to reconsider my Sona. I didn't quite recall what exactly prompted it, though I do remember a series of me trying to force myself to draw daily, only to set my tablet down, then to pick it back up again. I recall thinking if I could just get a steady stream of artwork, then I could stop working in the service industry. I paid for a few months of DeviantArt and changed my name to FoxLogic, which was a build-off of my name on Steam when I used to be called Fox Monroe, until somebody made fun of me and I changed it to Fox. FoxLogic, that's it. That's the name that really rung with me. I felt it got the point across while remaining genderless, yet direct. But what about my Sona design? I used to have this joke on my Fur Affinity account, look at me, I'm one of the only furries that doesn't even have a Sona. But I had to pick something that resonated with me, and I remembered that skull-faced skull-faced bog dog. It had died and decayed only to be brought back up again and put on display. This is kind of how I felt. My artwork was so very promising in college, but once I graduated, I was met with struggles, and I let it decay. Now I'm back up again, and I'm reanimating the corpse of my interest to be an artist and animator. Plus, with my love for horror and comic art, this just all felt like it worked. FoxLogic, a new Sona, a new look, and I couldn't be happier. Sure, they are not as extravagant as some of my other colorful creations, but I kind of like that. I like that the look is modest. And in my world, the character is far from powerful. They are simply a ghost, which explains their shapeshifting. I used to be an all-powerful, supreme being in my universe. Now I'm simply just an observer. Well, that has a bit of a hand in some underworld shenanigans. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my extra long story about myself and my journey through art and to making my Sona and what they mean to me. Thanks for the support.